Data. When you hear that word, what do you think it means? It's a very broad term that can mean a lot of things. What exactly is data? In the programming and technology world, data is almost everything. Images, audio files, text, the browser you're using to watch this video is data. It's a bit hard to understand it like that, but that's what data generally is. Luckily, when it comes to D3, data is broken down to be more specific. Data to D3 is just text and numbers. Generally speaking, your data can come from 4 sources. You can hard-code it into your JavaScript file, which is what we'll be doing in the beginning. Then there's data that comes from external sources. You can place your data in text files, also known as TXT files. There's also JSON, which is a JavaScript object in its own file. Lastly, there's spreadsheets or CSV files, which is short for comma-separated values. All 3 of these file types can be used with D3 easily. Data really can't do anything by itself. When it comes to data visualization, there are 2 parts to it. There's the data itself, which can be text or number-based. For example, the amount of dog owners in certain cities or how many students hold a certain grade. All of this would be considered your data. Then there's the second part, which is the visual part. For this course, that would be HTML and CSS. The average user can't understand raw data or understand HTML and CSS. That's where the challenge comes in, combining these 2 parts together into something the user can understand. Hence the phrase, data visualization. D3 is the library that bridges that gap, and it makes it easier for you to combine the data and the visual part together. Right now, let's focus on learning how to make elements appear on the page. Later, we'll learn how to add data into the mix. Right now, I'm inside my editor, and I have both my index.html and app.js files opened up. To start things off, I'm going to add my code inside the JavaScript file. When you loaded D3 through the script tags, you are provided an object called D3. This object will contain all the properties and methods related to D3. Usually, the first thing you'll want to do is select an element. Doing that is very simple. The D3 object has a method called select. You simply pass in a CSS selector of the element you'd like to grab. For example, if you wanted to select an element with a certain ID, then you just pass in a hashtag followed by the ID name. So if I had a div tag with the ID of foo, then I would pass in hashtag foo. For classes, you would use a dot instead of a hashtag. Lastly, if you just wanted to select a plain HTML element, then you would just pass in the element's name. So if I wanted to select a paragraph, then I would pass in P. Basically anything you can select with CSS can be inputted here. This is one method of selecting an element. Another method is by using the select all method. This works the exact same way as the select method, except for one thing. The select method will grab the first element it finds. For example, if I passed in the paragraph tag, then this will select the first paragraph element it finds. Even if we had multiple paragraph elements on the page, this will still only grab the first one. If you wanted to grab all the paragraph tags on the page, then you should use the select all method, which does this. So we have 2 methods here for selecting an element, but I'm going to just stick with the select method for now. I'm also going to change this to select the body element. We don't have a paragraph tag, but we do have the body element, which will work for now. I'm going to create a variable named L, which is short for element, and assign it to this value. Right below this, I'm going to console.log the element. I want to see what exactly is going on internally. I'm going to boot up my server by going to View, Open in Browser. Nothing is going on in the browser, which is to be expected, so let's check out the console. Inside the console, we have an object being logged, which is called selection. A selection is a JavaScript object that represents an HTML element on the browser. This is very important to understand, as selections are the most common objects you'll be working with. Essentially, when you're working with SVG elements, They are referenced as a selection object. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to the D3 selection repository. This basically documents and contains all the code for the D3 selection library. As I stated earlier, D3 has separated itself into various libraries for optimal performance. The developer behind D3 has gathered a lot of data and has determined that the selection library is commonly used, so he decided that it should be part of the core by default. You don't have to include this as it's already part of the core. However, if for whatever reason you just want to use the selection library by itself, then you can just download it here. So basically, the selection library is a way to select and change HTML elements. It's a very basic library. Feel free to read up on this page to learn more about it. We will discuss many of its features throughout the course. You will definitely get a lot of practice with it. Anyway, let's go back to the page and view the console tab again. Inside this, you'll see that the selection object contains two properties called groups and parents. We won't be diving too much into these two as it's not required to know. This is really for D3 and the browser to understand and use. Generally, the parents property contains the element that the element we're currently selecting is contained in. The groups property contains an array of the elements we selected. Let's look inside the groups property. Since we're using the select method, you will usually only see one element in the array, which is fine by us. Eventually, after going deep enough, you'll find the element with all the data applied to it. There's a lot going on here. All we did was write one line of code, and all of this was created for us. For the most part, we don't have to worry about a lot of this as it's handled for us by D3. What I do want to highlight about this data is the element itself right here. The body tag is represented here for us. This is not a string. This is the actual element itself. If I were to hover my mouse over this element, then you'll see my browser at the top highlighted for us. It'll be represented by this orange-red rectangle of the page itself. I can even click on this and I'll be taken to the Elements tab of the Developer Tools. The Developer Tools will automatically select the element we're selecting in JavaScript. This is one way to verify what elements you're currently using. So basically, D3 has given us a way to reference the actual element on the page. If you've ever used jQuery, then this concept should be familiar to you. Let's take a look at what a list of elements looks like. Back inside my file, I'm going to change the select method to select all and change body to P. We don't have any paragraph tags inside the HTML document, so this should return nothing. Once you have this changed, go to the HTML file and add a couple of paragraph tags. I'm going to add 3. With that all set up, let's refresh the page and check out the console. As usual, we have the selection object being displayed and we have the groups array populated with all our elements. I added 3 paragraph tags, so I'll see 3 paragraphs being selected. One difference you may notice is that D3 will refer to this as a node list. You'll hear the word node a lot in tutorials and even in your code. Basically, a node is the technical term for anything and everything in your document. That seems strange to hear, but that's what it is. Your elements are nodes. The attributes inside them are nodes. Even the text inside your elements are nodes. So when you see the word node list, it's basically saying a list of HTML elements. For the most part, you don't have to worry about the technical words here as it's just for D3 and the browser, so don't worry about it if you don't fully understand. Alright, I'm going to remove these paragraph tags and change my code back to its original state. I don't plan on using these at all. I want to keep everything simple for now. The last thing I want to show you is how to add elements. Usually when you select an element, you want to add onto it. Adding another element is very simple. Right after selecting the element, you can use the append method. This method is also a part of the D3 selection library. Even though the select method returns the selection, we still have access to the D3 library itself. This is taken care of for you. It's the magic behind the D3 library. This method accepts the name of the element you'd like to create. I'm going to keep it simple and pass in a paragraph tag. Let's refresh the page and see what we get. If you were to view the Elements tab, then you should see the p tags inside the body tag. So basically the append is doing two things. It's creating the element, and then it's adding onto the current selection. In this case, it would be the body tag. It's important to note that the element will be added inside the selection at the very end. This is why the paragraph tag appears right below the script tags. Let's view the object now. You'll notice that the selection changes to the p tag rather than the body tag. This is to be expected. D3 will shift its focus to the element you just added when you use the append method. Behind the scenes, D3 will call the select method for you and pass in the element you just created. By doing this, you are no longer manipulating or using the body element anymore. It's very important you understand this. Back inside my code, you'll see that I'm chaining all this together. The idea of calling one method after the other is called chaining methods. This is something that D3 heavily adopts. If you were to view any examples from D3, then you'll see there's a lot of chaining. This is something I want you to get used to. We'll be using a lot of chaining methods. In most cases, a lot of methods return the selection you have. If you don't understand or don't know what a method returns, then it's always a good idea to log the data or just check out the documentation. D3 is really well documented and will usually tell you what you can expect after calling a certain method. Of course, you can break this chaining method by using variables. Let's say I wanted to have a variable for both the body tag and paragraph tag. Well, that's simple to do. Right after selecting the body tag, I'm going to add a semicolon. Then I'm going to create a new variable named p and set its value to l.append, like so. Writing it like this is the same way we had before. The only difference is that now we have two selections being stored. If you wanted to continue adding onto the body element, then you can just reference it using the L element like we do in the second line. If you wanted to add more stuff to the paragraph element, then you can just reference it using the p variable. As the course progresses, you'll see me chaining methods and sometimes breaking that chain. You can use either style, but I usually like to mix them both together for readability and reusability. It's all preference. I'm going to undo these changes and just go back to what we had before. There's no need to break down our code like this right now. Anyway, that does it for now. There's actually a whole lot more things you can do with selections, but we'll explore that as the course progresses. I'll see you in the next lecture.